Hey everybody, Lawrence here, Dirty Basement Terrain, coming at you with another one. Columns, or more specifically, column jigs. They're a great little tool. They come in a variety of shapes and sizes. This one just happens to be the 1.5 by 5 inch number 7 jig from Dungeons by Hand. You can crank out a lot of really good columns by using one of these. I mean, this just happened, like I said, the number 7 jig, and this was cut out with this side. It looks good. I mean, really good. I personally like the shape and the way it looks. And painted up, they actually look pretty good. But I was thinking, I was like, these do look good, but what can I do to take them just a bit beyond what you get straight from the jig itself? Takes a little bit of effort, and it'll work pretty good. But with a little bit of effort, you can take this to the next level. What I want to do is I want to show you a series of different columns that I made. Well, these columns, and just simple little methods that you can take that column to the next level. But before we get started, I do want to say Dungeons by Hand is actually giving a discount code for their store. It will be down in the description, so if you use that code and go to their store on Etsy. Okay, future me here, gotta correct a mistake. It's not their Etsy store, it's dungeonbyhands.com, their actual website. And the discount code is Dirty Basement Terrain, all one word. Enter that at checkout and you get your 10% off. Sorry about the mistake, guys. Have fun. And you use this code that they're giving me, it'll get you 10% off your order. So use it. I mean, 10% is still 10%. And you can save a couple bucks. Also, I want to thank my patron, Dungeon Matron. Your support really helps the channel, and it's greatly appreciated. So thanks very much. Okay, guys, let's get to it.
Pretty simple. I already have some 1.5 inch thick foam cut to 5 inches long, and now I'm cutting it in 1.5 inch wide strips, which is what I need for the jig. Now I'm grabbing one of the blanks and inserting it into the jig, turning on the procs on, and just letting the jig do the job for me, running along simply along the pattern here and cutting out. That's one side done. You're going to have to do this 4 times for each jig, but one important thing to note is make sure you use the same pattern for each side, because if you use the other pattern, you're going to wind up with one wonky looking column. And yes, I have done it. And one last cut to make here. Pop it out, and you have a column for just a few moments of work. Now this is the simplest upgrade you can do to a column from a jig. I'm just running a X-Acto blade lightly along where each segment of the column meets. Basically, I'm trying to make it look like each piece is separate instead of one solid piece. It's a simple little thing to do, but it actually winds up looking really good. Again, it's just lightly scoring with the X-Acto, and then I'm going to use the expensive number 2 pencil sculpting tool to accentuate the line that I've just scored. Again, this is a really simple way to upgrade that column you just cut out, and it winds up looking, well, pretty good. It makes the columns look like it's several different pieces of block instead of just one solid piece. Occasionally you'll get a couple wonky lines from your Proxon or your Hercules, whatever hot wire table you're using. And a simple way to fix it is just to I'm using nail files or emery boards that I got from the Dollar Tree, and just give it a light sanding until it's smoothed out, and you'll have a smooth stone surface. And here's something else you can do to make your columns pop a little bit more. Lightly score the foam and then go along where you scored again with the pencil or whatever you want to use and carve in some cracks. Now, I like to use the X-Acto blade to score it in first, just so, because sometimes when you're doing this, if you just use the pencil, you can actually get some tears and lines that you just don't want. But doing this, you get a much more precise cut, and that's what I'm going for right now. But again, this is just adding some cracks into the columns, just to make it look a little older, like it's a tiny bit weathered, and it's starting to crack under the pressure of whatever it's holding up. And here's something again that you can do to weather and wear down your columns. A simple foil ball texturing to make it look like it's starting to wear down over time. For this one, I'm going with a really light texturing. I'm not like gouging in deep pits or anything. Just enough to dent it up a little bit, make it look like it's really, really old or just crumbling away. Or not crumbling away, but pit it and little dings and dents. But again, this is just a really light foil ball technique, and we all know how to do the foil ball. And now that I've done that, I'm going to score in a bunch of cracks. And here is yet something else you can do to accentuate your columns. I'm using a fine tip Sharpie here, and I'm just drawing in random symbols. If you want to put runes or some kind of elvish script or whatever you want, you can. But for the purpose of this, yeah, I'm just doing random symbols. Kind of like this one's important. Or you could do a whole room like this if you want to. Like maybe it's a magical symbols or whatnot. Well, once I got all the symbols drawn in, I'm going along, scoring along the lines. See, the Sharpie marks are mainly a guide for when I'm doing this right now. I would rather have the guides just to make it easier. I already have my symbols drawn, and I just have to lightly score it with the X-Acto. And then as soon as I'm done scoring everything, I'm going to come back with my pencil and then make the lines a lot wider and deeper. So this is a really simple little thing you can do to your columns that will make them pop a little more. And here with this one, I'm adding a bunch of cracks, as same as a lot of the others that I've already done. This is a pretty simple thing to do. Lightly score it with the X-Acto and then hit it with the pencil. Now, what I really want to do with this is, again, this is a foil ball technique, but rather than like the previous one, I'm being pretty heavy-handed with this to make it look really old and beaten up and worn out. Like, it's just barely holding together. Like, it's ready to fall apart at any moment. I'm being very heavy-handed with the foil ball technique, and this is, like I said, just to make it look like it's all but ready to fall apart. And here I'm using my oval blade to actually cut each section of the column apart. Like, this column has actually gotten to that point where it fell apart. And again, this is just cutting each section apart, and you might want to leave the bottom two together like they stayed there. Now, where I cut it apart, there's some little wonky things, so I'm just going to sand down the bumps and whatnot so I don't have any weird things or whatever. I don't know. In my head, when I was doing this, it made sense, even though I'm going to be messing these up in a little bit. And here I'm using a very heavy-handed foil ball technique again because this pillar has collapsed. And I want it to look like it is old, and been beaten down over time. So, again, this is a very heavy-handed, and I just want it to look old. And, well, ruined. And yet again, here I am adding cracks. I mean, if the thing fell apart, it's going to have a lot of cracks. A light score with the X-Acto and gone back over to widen the cuts with the pencil. You can't have a collapsed column without a lot of cracks. So I'm kind of going a little heavy-handed with the cracks on this piece, on these pieces, but again, this is a collapsed column, so it fell apart. And here I'm also actually picking pieces off, breaking pieces in half. As you can see right there, along a crack I made. And where I do actually break it in half, I'll also hit it with the foil ball. I'm just beating these pieces up. Chunks need to come off. It needs to look, well, like it fell over and pieces came off. It's pretty simple. And breaking pieces and pulling pieces, chunks off, just really will make a collapsed column pop. And here I've cut out a base out of some medium graphics chipboard, and I'm just gluing the individual pieces of the column down. Now you kind of want to keep it kind of close to how the column stacked, like in order of it how it fell. Because if you put the bottom piece at the, or if you put a piece that was just on the bottom, way up at the top. And here I want to add some grit and some sand to the base. So I'm just going to paint the whole base with some standard PVA. Just so I have something for everything to stick to. And I was thinking that these random chunks of pine bark nuggets, little small pieces, would, because I use them as rocks, would look good in different locations. After, yeah, this works. And here I'm grabbing some large grits material. It's from Gale Force 9. I've had it for years, so I'm finally using it. And sprinkle that in a few random places, and then now I'm just using standard construction sand, or mortar sand specifically, and covering the rest of it. Tap it off, and it's good to go. Had some warping, which happens when you use the material I did. An easy way to fix it is to just flip it over and paint the bottom. I'm using some black Mod Podge, but standard PVA would also work. 24 hours later, once it's fully dried, it should fix the warp. Now here, I'm just adding my black Mod Podge to all the foam, just to give it that protective coat. It's a pretty simple thing to do, and it'll help protect your build over time. This is pretty simple. I'm just using some dark blue gray from Apple Barrel as a base coat, dark gray. So I'm going for, or trying to go for 100% coverage with this. And here I'm picking at one of those sponge brushes that we never know what to do with. And I'm going to stipple on some random colors onto the stonework. I'm going to use 3 colors, and it won't hardly be noticeable, but it does give it that little extra something. And here I'm using some pewter gray from Apple Barrel to give the column an overbrush of like 85% coverage, just leaving the deepest cracks and recesses alone. And here I'm using some granite gray or light gray to give the column a dry brush. This is just real quick, not heavy coverage or anything like this. Using a cheap makeup brush from the Dollar Tree, my favorite dry brush. And here I'm using a dark brown wash just to make the columns look a little dirty and grimy. Basically, it's a homemade wash, quick and simple. Just slabbing it on. And here I'm doing a highlight dry brush, working my way from the top down. Basically looking like light coming from above, catching the edges and whatnot. This is a real quick, light, dry, like I said, light dry brush. Catching highlights of all the nooks and crannies. And here I'm going to use a homemade dark brown pigment powder. And I'm just kind of getting dirt where I think the shadows need to be, or it just looks dirty. Like along the cracks, at where the segments meet up. Anywhere that it looks like dirt would collect. And, even along the bottom edges there. This also accentuates the cracks, makes them pop a little bit more. And again, this is just another simple thing to do that will make it pop and make it look better. At least in my opinion. And here, just spritzing everything down with a hit of isopropyl to lock in all that pigment powder so it doesn't rub off. You'll lose some of the dustiness doing this, but then the powder won't rub off. Okay, now a couple of these don't really need this next step, like the nice ones, fresh ones. All these ones that have like cracks and are beaten up, I'm going to add some moss paste to. Now, the worse it looks, or the better it looks, like with this one, I'm only going to add minimal moss to. Just like it's just starting to go. And once I get the moss on, I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of this yellow grass fine tuft on it, just to highlight and give a little bit more visual interest to the moss. And again, the worse and more beat up it looks, the more moss I'm going to add. Like, the moss has had more of a chance to take hold and grow, just to make it look older and nastier. At least that was what was going through my head when I decided to do it this way. And again, sprinkle the yellow fine. Now with these collapse columns, I decided to add a few grass tufts just to accentuate the fact that they've fallen and been there for a while, and some random weeds or grasses had a chance to actually take hold. I thought it looked good, so that's why I did it. Of course, that's the reason we do anything, really, because we think it looks good. But anyway, I wanted to make it look pretty. This is a pretty simple, using grass tufts. Simple dip into, I'm actually using watered down PVA right here. But dip it in, place it to where you think it looks good. But try not to overdo it. This is just like, I'm just trying to give it a little extra. And here are all the pretty shots of everything I just did. I think they look good. These are all from the same column jig, number 7 from Dungeons by Hands, and I'm really happy with how they turned out and what you can do with a column jig.
Hey everybody, if you made it this far, it means you watched to the end, and as always, I do appreciate it. If you like the video, hit the thumbs up, click subscribe, leave a comment if you want to. But again, I hope what you guys just saw, because using these simple these actually not simple, but really great jigs, you get a great shape, but with a little bit of extra effort, you can get a much more variety and take those columns to the next level. Again, hope you guys liked what you saw, and always remember, when you're crafting terrain, there's only one person you got to worry about, and that's you, because it is your terrain.